The year is 1868, Spain has just gone through a messy breakup with its queen, Isabella II, and they are like, who's going to be our next monarch? No one in Spain seemed interested in the job, probably because it was a political dumpster fire, so they looked abroad for a candidate. After all, Spain's internal contenders were few and far between, and none seemed equipped or willing to tackle the immense challenges ahead. Enter Leopold, a German prince from the House of Hohenzollern. Now, Leopold wasn't exactly eager to jump into the Spanish throne drama, but Otto von Bismarck, the Chancellor of the North German Confederation, had other plans. Bismarck convinced Leopold to at least consider the offer. Why? Because Bismarck wasn't just playing politics, he was playing 4D chess. A German on the Spanish throne could mean a big geopolitical win for Prussia. Meanwhile, France was not having it. Under Emperor Napoleon III, France freaked out at the idea of a German-friendly Spain. They were worried about being encircled by a German-Spanish alliance. Now here's a fun fact, Napoleon III wasn't just any random ruler. He was the nephew of the Napoleon Bonaparte. That's right, the same guy who dominated Europe in the early 19th century. Napoleon III had big shoes to fill, and he styled himself as the heir to his uncle's legacy. Spoiler alert, he didn't quite live up to it. Napoleon sent his ambassador to meet with King Wilhelm I of Prussia to demand two things. First, stop Leopold from pursuing the Spanish throne. Second, promise that no Hohenzollern would ever try this again. Wilhelm was like, okay, we will call off Leopold, but that second demand, yeah, no. Wilhelm sent his reply politely, but Bismarck, ever the drama queen, decided to stir the pot. He edited Wilhelm's response to make it sound like a major diss and leaked it to the press. This Ems telegram was the 19th century equivalent of subtweeting, and it worked. The French public was furious. Napoleon III, feeling the heat, declared war on Prussia on July 19, 1870. And just like that, the Franco-Prussian War began. France went into the war with confidence. They had a professional army, good weapons, and a reputation for being formidable. On paper, things looked solid. But Prussia had a secret weapon, Helmut von Moltke. This guy was a military genius who had spent years planning for this very conflict. He wasn't just winging it. He had maps, plans, and most importantly, trains. Yes, trains. Prussia's railway network allowed them to move troops and supplies faster than anyone else. The southern German states Bavaria, Württemberg, and Baden saw what was happening and thought, maybe we should back Prussia. They didn't want France steamrolling through their territory, and so they allied with the North German Confederation. Now, it was Germany, kind of united, versus France. The first shots of the war were fired on August 2, 1870, when the French Second Corps under General Charles Fossard crossed the border and attacked Saarbrücken. His scouts had informed him it was defended by only a single isolated regiment. Confident in his numerical advantage and superior technology, Fossard's forces made short work of the German defenders. However, this victory was short-lived. It was the last time France would be on the offensive. On August 4th, Prussian forces struck back at Wissembourg, overwhelming the French defenders with superior numbers and coordination. Despite fierce resistance, the French were pushed back, suffering heavy casualties. The defeats only escalated from there. At the Battle of Wörth on August 6th, the French forces were decisively beaten. Outgunned and outmaneuvered, the French army was forced into a chaotic retreat. Meanwhile, at the Battle of Spicheren, another French corps was crushed, further eroding the chances of holding the Germans at bay. By mid-August, the French army of the Rhine was in full retreat towards Metz. At Gravelotte, on August 18th, the French forces attempted to halt the German advance, but were ultimately encircled and besieged in Metz. With this army trapped, Napoleon III and the remaining French forces attempted to regroup in the north, but they were walking into a trap. On September 1st, 1870, the French army, led by Napoleon III himself, found itself surrounded at Sedan. Outnumbered and outgunned, the French were subjected to relentless artillery bombardment. Attempts to break out were repelled with heavy losses. As the day went on, Napoleon III moved aimlessly back and forth among his troops, despairing and wishing a German shell would bring an end to his suffering. By the end of the day, over 100,000 French soldiers, including the Emperor, surrendered. You have heard that right. The Emperor of France was now a prisoner of war. It was a big humiliation for France. When news of Napoleon's surrender reached Paris, the city collectively lost its mind. Riots broke out, and the people decided it was time for another revolution. They overthrew the empire and declared the Third Republic. Because this is Paris in the 19th century, revolutions are basically a seasonal tradition. The new French government, led by the ever-optimistic Léon Gambetta, vowed to keep fighting. But here's the problem. The French army was in shambles. The best troops were either dead, captured, or demoralized. Meanwhile, the German forces, now bolstered by their southern allies, were advancing rapidly. By late September, the Germans had Paris surrounded. They laid siege to the city, cutting off supplies and waiting for the French to give up. The siege of Paris was brutal. Food shortages became so severe that people started eating zoo animals. And when they ran out of zoo animals, rats. It was pure horror. While Paris was starving, the Germans were having a grand old time. On January 18th, 1871, in the glittering Hall of Mirrors at the Palace of Versailles, King Wilhelm I of Prussia was crowned Emperor of Germany. Bismarck had done it. He had unified Germany under Prussian leadership. It was the birth of the German Empire, or as the Germans called it, das Deutsche Kaiserreich. This was a huge deal. For centuries, Germany had been a patchwork of independent states, dukedoms, and principalities. Now it was one nation, powerful, industrialized, and ready to flex on the global stage. By early 1871, Paris couldn't hold out any longer. The city was starving, disease was rampant, and morale was at rock bottom. The French government agreed to an armistice in late January. But the misery wasn't quite over yet. In March, Paris erupted into chaos once again. Radical socialists and workers seized control of the city, declaring the Paris Commune. The French government, now based in Versailles, wasn't amused. They sent troops to crush the Commune in a bloody conflict that lasted several weeks. By May, the Commune was defeated, but the scars of the uprising would linger for years. Meanwhile, the Treaty of Frankfurt was signed in May 1871. Here's what it said. France had to pay a massive war indemnity of 5 billion francs, an eye-watering amount at the time. Germany got to keep Alsace and Lorraine, two resource-rich regions that France was very attached to. German troops would occupy parts of France until the indemnity was paid. For France, it was a humiliating defeat. For Germany, it was a triumphant victory, and for Bismarck, it was the ultimate mic drop. The Franco-Prussian War had massive consequences. First and foremost, it created a united Germany. This fundamentally changed the balance of power in Europe. Germany was now a major player, rivaling Britain and France. For France, the loss of Alsace-Lorraine was a national trauma. The region wasn't just economically valuable, it was culturally and emotionally significant. Revenge for Alsace-Lorraine became a rallying cry in French politics, a sentiment that fueled the French policy of revanchism. This deep longing to reclaim the lost territories would shape French foreign policy for decades, ensuring the tensions between France and Germany remained high. The war also had consequences beyond France and Germany. Since France needed its troops for the war, it pulled them out of the Papal States. This left the Papal States unprotected, and the newly unified Kingdom of Italy took the chance to capture Rome and make it their capital. The goal of uniting Italy was finally achieved. Meanwhile, Bismarck was riding high. He had achieved his dream of a united Germany, and he did it on his terms. But the seeds of future conflict were already being sown. The harsh terms of the Treaty of Frankfurt and the annexation of Alsace-Lorraine ensured that France and Germany would remain bitter enemies. The Franco-Prussian War was a short but impactful conflict that reshaped Europe. It marked the end of French dominance and the rise of Germany as a continental power. It also set the stage for alliances and rivalries that would eventually lead to World War I.